Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Haitians, A Decolonial History by Jean Casimir, translated by Laurent Dubois, forward by Walter de Mignolo, narrated by Janina Edwards. Forward. Thinking Decoloniality Beyond One Nation, One State. Walter de Mignolo. 1. In her celebrated TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie makes a powerful political statement, a politics that no doubt touches the core of the well-crafted discourses of scholarship, journalism, state, banks, and corporations. She asserts that individuals' single stories are dangerous, not only because the storyteller, whether scholar, journalist, banker, or officer of the state, acts on the assumption of the truth without any parentheses of what the story conveys, what the storyteller says, but also because the storyteller assumes that there is only one place to start the story. Adichie captured this second aspect of storytelling, whether scientific, scholarly, journalistic, literary, political, economic, when she underscored that stories truly depend on where you start. She gave a couple of examples, and I will paraphrase one. If you start from asserting the failure of state building in Africa, you may very well end up justifying colonialism. If you start from the fact that state building in Africa truly comprised a colony of European imperialisms, a map of Africa in 1900, a decade and a half after the Berlin Conference, reveals that there is not one single corner of the continent that was not under the control and management of European countries, then you may very well end up apprehending and understanding the lies that justified, and continue to justify, colonialism. That is, you may very well end up disparaging and critiquing the lies of modernity, such as conversion to Christianity, progress, the civilizing mission, and development. This is precisely what Jean Casimir's argument in this book, as well as in his previous publications, intends to do: to expose the limits and the dangers, sometimes, of extant stories and interpretations of Hispaniola, Saint-Domingue, and finally Haiti, 3 different names that erased, from the early arrival of Spanish ships, the name that the Tainos had for their territory, Haiti. The analytic story that Casimir offers to us as La merveilleuse invention of Haiti is precisely that, the renaming and territorial reconfiguration of a trajectory that started with the Spanish genocides of the Tainos, followed by the French appropriation of a sector of the islands the Spaniards called Hispaniola and the French called Saint-Domingue. And after 1804, after a revolution that lasted from 1791 to 1804, the revolutionaries' adoption of the name Haiti to honor the memories of the indigenous inhabitants of the island, before indigenous people from Europe invaded and exterminated them. The question is, who are the Haitian revolutionaries? What shall we understand by the term Haitian Revolution? The answer to this question would depend on where you start from. Would you start from the well-known heroes of the Revolution, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Toussaint Louverture, and Henri Christophe, who confronted France's management of the island, but without questioning the nation-state form that they wanted to create, or from the first president of Haiti, after the assassination of Dessalines, Alexandre Pétion, and his conciliatory politics with the French government? Well, it so happened that Casimir starts from neither of those points. He starts from the power and beauty of the sovereign people, beyond the official stories we are used to and which are identified by proper names, the proper names I mentioned. There are the silences of the past. In the happy formulation of Michel Rolfe-Trouillot, La beauté du peuple souverain. Here precisely is where Casimir starts. If listeners ask what I have learned from writing this book that I now offer to them, my answer is that, above all, in how I live my personal life, I no longer see my ancestors as former slaves. I don't even think of them as a dominated class. Their misery is only the most superficial aspect of their reality. It is the reality that colonists prefer to emphasize. Along with those among them who oppose the cruelty of some colonists, but don't ultimately reject colonization itself. Having finished this book, I have come to realize that my ancestors, as individuals and as a group, never stopped resisting slavery and domination. I am the child of a collective of fighters, not of the vanquished. I have chosen to venerate them, to honor these captives reduced to slavery, and those emancipated in thanks for their military service to colonialism. I do so despite their errors and their occasional failures. The statement is crucial to understand Casimir's argument both in what he says and in his saying, in what he enunciates and in the enunciations he builds. The statement is crucial also because Casimir plays the game of scholarship. His archive is solid. His sociological training and practices of historiographical sociology through the years has been impeccable. But at the same time, he disobeys it. And herein is the force of his argument. The moment that he uses scholarship to advance the cause of the sovereign people, instead of using the sovereign people to advance scholarship. Casimir, as is clear in the statement and through the argument, let himself be guided by his emotions. I am the child of a collective of fighters, not of the vanquished. Exposed in his reasoning. It depends on where you start from. If you start from the heroes and maintain the silence of the sovereign people, you remain within the colonial politics of knowledge. If you shift the geography of reasoning and let it be guided by your emotions, you engage in the growing processes nowadays of decolonial politics of knowing, sensing, and believing. 2. Captives reduced to slavery. Another crucial distinction that reinforces Casimir's putting up from his locus enunciationi, which is normatively silenced in any of the existing disciplines. Disciplines promote objectivity and direct your attention to the said while veiling the act of saying. Consequently, Casimir proposes a decolonial reading of the invention, formation, and transformation of the Haitian people since 1804, but one grounded in the experiences and shared memories, mainly orally transmitted, no archives for historians here, of the daily praxis of living in re-existence, building the communal in spite of state politics, in any of their variety from 1804 to today. How could the people have gained and maintained its sovereignty? Two distinctive praxes of living emerge from Casimir's argument. One is explicit and explained in detail in Chapter 7, the question of language. While French language remained the official language of the state of Haiti, Creole remained the language of the sovereign people. Throughout the period of the French monarchic state before 1789, as well as the succeeding bourgeois French successions of republics and empires, the sovereign people, though captive and physically enslaved, never surrendered, and therefore were never captive or enslaved in the sphere of language. As Casimir states, all behavior implies knowledge. Chapter 8. What we all of us human beings know is the outcome of not so much what we see or read, but of what we do, by will or force, and share in storytelling and conversations from the moment we come into this world, in whatever region and moment one is born. For those who were born in Africa, in any of the existing kingdoms, languages, and systems of belief, religions, and were captured, transported, and enslaved in New World plantations, their doing was marked by the experience of being hunted, of being transported, and being enslaved. For their descendants, it was the experience in the New World as captive and enslaved, until the revolution started in 1791 at Bois Caiman. All of that built a memory alien to French schooling before the revolution, and French-style schooling after the revolution. French language and Christianity remained alien to the sovereign people for whom the Creole language and Vodou spirituality became the glue of the communal re-existence. I would highlight spirituality and language, without, of course, forgetting labor and the biological praxis of living necessary to provide labor of any kind, living labor, forced labor, or waged labor. I am highlighting language and spirituality because it is difficult to engage in conversation and tell stories about labor by doing labor unless that labor is the labor of engaging in conversations about labor and engaging in communal spirituality to propel and maintain the communal via the knowledge and culture the sovereign people creates, innovates, and enjoys. Casimir doesn't elaborate much on joy and love, but I heard him talking about it. And frankly, one cannot understand the survival of the sovereign people without mentioning the joy and love derived from language, Creole, and spirituality, Vodou, which made possible not only their survival, but also their re-existence in love, which means here care, respect, and affection. Care, in the moral sense, means fundamental elements of relationality and complementarity in life, where humans are but a small portion of the universe's living energies. Respect implies relations of complementarity, relationality, toward human beings, and for living energies and organisms on the planet. It means respect for elders, who are the philosophers and the guides for re-existence and communal life. These are the ancestors Casimir identifies as his own. Casimir operates from the knowledge of his ancestors, addressing an audience schooled in disciplinary formations. In this sense, Casimir is shifting the geography of emotions and reasoning. Chapter 9 is titled, An Independent State Without a Sovereign People. The foundational idea of the modern European nation-state, the form of governance of the European ethno-class, Sylvia Wynter, the bourgeoisie, was precisely this. To each state corresponds one nation. This is the secular nation-state that in Europe displaced the monarchic state and its religious support. Christianity, either Catholic or Protestant. In the colonies, it has always been, and continued to be, something else. To start with, the European bourgeoisie that created the nation-state after the Glorious Revolution in England and the French Revolution was indigenous to Europe. Indigenous. Adjective. Born or originating in a particular place. 1640s, from late Latin indigenous, born in a country, native. From Latin indigena, sprung from the land, native. As a noun, a native, literally inborn or born in a place. From Old Latin indu. Preposition. In, within, plus gignera. Perfective gainwe. To beget, produce. From Pi root gene. Give birth, beget. With derivatives referring to procreation and familial and tribal groups. In Haiti, and in all former colonies, there were no bourgeoisie. Whether the population building the state was indigenous, like in India after 1947, or Algeria after 1962, or native, in the biological sense of Creole, being born in a country from immigrant parents. Creole, people. Spanish Criollo, French Creole. Originally, any person of European, mostly French or Spanish, or African descent, born in the West Indies, or parts of French or Spanish America, and thus naturalized in those regions, rather than in the parent's home country. The term has since been used with various meanings, often conflicting or varying from region to region. Instead of bourgeoisie, in the nation-state building after independence in former colonies, what we have are either indigenous elites, generally in Africa and Asia, or native or Creole elites in the Americas and the Caribbean. The indigenous population in the Americas and Caribbean, Indians, because of Columbus's mistake, were either exterminated or marginalized and pushed outside the public sphere. In Haiti, the nation-state was founded mainly by foreigners from Africa, Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Henri Christophe, and by natives or Creoles from African parents like Toussaint Louverture, and from wealthy French fathers and free mulatto mothers, Alexandre Pétion. Plantation owners in the former colonies did not equate with the European bourgeoisie that emerged from the wealth extracted from the colonies and the incipient, at the turn of the 19th century, Industrial Revolution. In that historical frame of political, economic, and cultural dependency from France, the rebellion that started in Bois Caiman in 1791 engendered the revolution and two trajectories after 1804. One was the trajectory of building the state, including internal disputes between the North, Toussaint, Christophe, and the South, Pétion, and since then, between the political parties that formed the modern or colonial nation-state. The other trajectory was the emergence of the sovereign people, which is not, as it should be per the definition of the nation-state, a constitutive sphere of the independent state of Haiti. The state is a legal and administrative institution, while the nation is the ethnic and cultural dimension of the state. In the colonies, it is hardly the case that the nation or nations match the state, as was the case in Europe, France, Germany, England, Italy, when the modern nation-state emerged. The soul of the sovereign people is not constituted by the law of the state and the administration of culture dependent on French language, education, and political and economic theories. Instead, it is constituted by the experience and memories of the slave trade, captivity and enslavement, forced labor and dehumanization. If knowledge is grounded in what we do, rather than in what we see or read, then the Creole language and Vodou spirituality are the glue of the sovereign people, as Casimir narrates and argues in this book. Near the end of Chapter 9, Casimir writes, "The Haitian peasantry, and those of the entire Caribbean, constituted themselves in opposition to the processes of integration and assimilation to the commodity-producing plantation. Their culture was and remains a response to slavery, a form of self-defense responding to the abuses inflicted by modern colonial society. From the moment the captives took control of their gardens and provision gardens and demanded more free days in the wake of the general insurrection, the counter-plantation system and the institutions through which it was articulated were put into place. These included gender relations, family, the laku, indivisible collective property, Vodou temples, rural markets, garden towns, leisure, crafts, the arts. They were reproduced within and thanks to the local language the counter-plantation system appropriated. Taken together, all of these became specific tools for the class struggles of the Haitian peasantry. All the attempted attacks from the modern or colonial world represented by the oligarchs of the country shattered against these ramparts. Those who imagined they could fight on another terrain were not conscious of the importance of class. They could not comprehend the collection of structured institutions that make the Haitian a Haitian." Listeners less familiar with Vodou and the history of the African diaspora in Haiti may know the meaning of laku. It is a crucial concept to understanding the foundation of the sovereign people and the line that separates the laku from the state geographical administration, state territory. The laku names the confluence of land, meaning complementarity of life and earth, not a piece of private property. That implies the extended family, not the Christian or bourgeois family and its private property, and spirituality, rather than institutional religion, which is a necessary component of even Western secular states. To these components should be added the peristyle, or shrine, the equivalent of church, mosque, or synagogue, where the sacred mapu tree links, as in many non-modern cosmologies, the potomiton, the center, the woman-mother, the spiritual world, and the earth, land. The laku is inextricable from the Haitian praxis of living, the Creole language, and Vodou spirituality. Hence, it is the soul of le peuple souverain. Casimir closes Chapter 9 with the following words, the words of Antancia, recorded by Mimrose Beaupoint in Saint-Domingue, define the local community as the cradle of national sovereignty. The laku, Antancia told me, is a well-defined geographical space, but the civil authorities have no authority over this space. Laku is equivalent to Ailu among the Amira and Quechua-speaking and spiritual communals, and equivalent to Greek oikos and Nahuatl Altepetal, all of them and many more in Asia and Africa. There is, for example, Ibn Khaldun, Asabiya, which runs parallel in Arabic civilization to Islamic Ummah, and of course Chinese or Mandarin, Tianxia, all under heaven. All of these are not pre-modern. They are non-modern. They have never gone away, in spite of the veil that Western concepts placed on them, and the pre-modern temporality to which modern temporality relegated them. There is no pre-modernity. Modernity and nation-state are Western equivalents that had the institutional, linguistic, political, epistemic, and economic privilege to make us believe that all these non-modern practices were pre-modern. And once modernity arrived, they all became fossilized in the past, where they remain in the imaginary historical museum of world traditions. This fiction was enacted by coloniality of knowledge, hidden under the promises of Western modernity. One assumption of Western epistemology consists in positing that knowledge needs no qualifier. That is why it is not common to say modernity of knowledge. The grammar of modern European vernacular languages, which are imperial, and the language of modern epistemology, prevents knowledge from being modified by modernity, turning modernity into an adjective, modernity of knowledge. But that is precisely what the grammar of decoloniality requires, to see both sides of knowledge, modernity of knowledge and coloniality of knowledge. 3. What is a decolonial reading? First, by disassociation, it is not a sociological, historical, anthropological, political reading. That is, it is a reading that delinks from existing options. Therefore, the decolonial is an option, but an option that is and is not disciplinary. It is an option that starts from the personal, subjective relations with Casimir's ancestors, and then uses sociology, history, anthropology, political theory, and economics instead of using disciplinary formations. Coloniality of knowledge highlighted either the positive, economic gains, or negative, slave trade, of the French colony Saint-Domingue. When it comes to the revolution, coloniality of knowledge silenced the Haitian people to highlight the independence, the heroes of the independence, and the role of France in this new configuration. Coloniality of knowledge, or what is the same, accounts based on principles of social sciences and humanities of Western modernity, tells half of the story. Casimir starts from an elsewhere, from the half of the story that was silenced, the formation of the Haitian nation despite the Haitian state. This shift, this disobedience, this drive toward independent thought is a fundamental step to decolonial freedom. I define the Haitian Revolution as the destruction of a slave system through the creation of a national community. Women played a fundamental role in the foundation of this new community, which was based on a family structure embedded within a broader social environment created precisely to ensure that this structure could flourish. This is the most beautiful Haitian creation, the simultaneous invention of a nation, of the conditions for its social and economic existence, and of the institutions that could guarantee its survival. The reflections I offer here are meant to open the way for what I dare hope will be the contribution of the emerging generation of thinkers, the codification of our way of re-existing, despite the infinite turpitudes imposed on us by the modern West from 1492 to the present day. In this book, I show how we are able to re-exist by reconstructing our sovereignty and the institutions that supported it, and by prioritizing them over our relationships with the outside world. Decolonial reading means reading how modernity or coloniality is at work generating images of the world, reality, that prevent us from seeing what is in front of us. In many interpretations, there is a curtain that prevents us from seeing what is behind it. It is common to think, for example, that slave is a word that names an entity, that creates an ontology of the entity that fits the meaning of the word. A human being named slave vanishes as a human being, absorbed by the meaning of the word. To delink from that illusion is one of the tasks of decolonial reading. of exposing the ontological fiction of Western modernity's vocabulary in all its modern vernacular languages. That is why Casimir insists on distinguishing captive from slave. In this sense, the decolonial option was already part of the sphere of the imperial state, but it remained unthinkable within or from this sphere. The state thought with its own concepts and its own blindness. Given that the decolonial option could not be avoided as one of the targets of its activity, the empire constantly took measures aimed at preventing any counter-thinking from expressing itself and creating an alternative consciousness, that is, from institutionalizing a locus of enunciation outside of the control of the public administration, a location of power that could defy it. The entity named slave is constitutive in the formation of Haiti's modern or colonial state, but at the same time unthinkable from the perspective in which the sphere of the state is conceived, imagined, and enacted. What is unthinkable from the assumptions and storytelling of Western modernity is what Michel Rolfe-Trouillot underscored. The Haitian Revolution is a non-event because slaves are unthinkable as revolutionary actors. To make the unthinkable thinkable, to bring silences into the conversation, a non-colonial locus of enunciation is necessary. Casimir finds the decolonial option necessary at the moment in which the connection with his ancestors, the fighters, and the beauty of the sovereign people calls for a narrative that could no longer be rendered through the channels of disciplinary formations. This is a moment in which the silences of modernity can no longer be kept hostage, when bringing them to the surface and to the present is not only a question of the politics and ethics of scholarship in getting the record straight, but above all about pursuing the necessary and unavoidable option of disclosing the naturalization of repression, dehumanization as the basic technology of racism. This means revaluing what modernity devalues and celebrating the praxis of living that the imaginary of modernity has taught us to see as an impediment to progress and development. Given today's obvious failure of the nation-state form of governance, the implication of Casimir's argument extends beyond the history of Haiti and helps us understand, through the political creativity and communal ethics of the Haitian people, the trajectories of all the pueblos originarios in the Americas, from southern Chile and Argentina to Canada. What neither the monarchic state and the viceroyalty, nor the republics, nation-states, created after independence from Spain and Portugal in South America, and from England, the United States, and France, Canada, in North America, were ever able to colonize was the communal will, the original languages, the wisdom of the elders. Today, the vocabulary of reexistence, of reemergence, and of reexistence is the common and crucial vocabulary in their praxis of living, in spite of and confronting the state. In a general sense of decoloniality, it is the decolonial consciousness that guides their or our will to epistemic, political, ethical, and economic liberation, despite, again, the state. The Zapatistas in southern Mexico have been also the most visible communal praxis of reexistence. But that is not all. The financial crisis in Argentina imprinted a tragic mark on the middle class. It was a colonial wound, but not a racist and sexist wound. It had a psychological effect on people, losing what they had taken for granted, that they were citizens and the state would take care of them. All of a sudden came the realization, which today is expanding, that the state, any state, not just Argentina, cares less and less for its citizens. The modern nation-state created in Europe toward the end of the 18th and during the 19th century, the nation-state that consolidated the secular bourgeoisie over the monarchic state and the church, the nation-state that expanded to the colonies and became the key institution to regulate political coloniality, that state is today losing its mask. The mask is torn away in the European Union by immigrants and refugees, in the United States by immigrants and by the financial and corporate sector taking over the state, and in the former colonies, comparing North Africa and the Middle East, Because, as Chimamanda Ngozi
Sample complete. Ready to continue?